Hi, everybody. I'm here with Joy Soudant, and we're talking about recruiter enablement. So, Joy, thank you for joining me. Give us a quick introduction to you.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for having me, Adam. I'm Joy Soudant, as you said, and I'm an in-house executive search recruiter and TA manager. And I've worked at some very large and complex organizations like Ford, IBM, and Raytheon, where I started a small executive recruiting team. And then I've also worked at smaller startups and boutique firms. In terms of my journey into recruiting, when I got out of college with my art history degree that I had no idea what to do with. I did what most people would do. I dove into a job in financial services and, made my way where I was able to learn about recruiting as an actual career path and made a pivot into TA and HR roles and worked across different industries. My last 10 years has really been about executive recruiting, which I absolutely fell in love with, as well as working at like technical types of companies. Um, my last role was as leadership TA manager at Greenhouse Software, and I just loved being an HR tech startup. That space was really cool. And then, like so many TA folks today, was recently laid off, and I'm looking for my next adventure at this point.
Um, I'd like to ask about your experience studying history of art, and did that give you any skills or expertise that you've been able to use in recruiting?
Yes. So if you'd asked me that when I first started, I would have said no. But now I think with a lot of years in recruiting, I think some of the core skills I learned, critical thinking, observing. So a lot of, looking at something that looks one way and then really trying to kind of deeply understand what's going on and what was going on in the mind of an artist. So those are definitely two things. I did a lot of writing and analyzing. And I think those two skills are really important for people that are in recruiting as well. I don't know that you necessarily think of those two things, but I definitely think those have all helped me a lot.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The reason I asked the question is I studied history and politics,
Hmm.
and I always knew that studying those subjects was helping me to write better, and that's great for achieving influence.
Hmm.
But in actual fact, I've subsequently realized just in the last few years that actually research, critical thinking, absolutely, but
Hmm.
research and ability to, I think, kind of what you said, actually, look at what's really going on and being able to analyze circumstances. So yeah, interesting to
Yeah.
find out your response to that.
I think it's like when you really look at it like from that history perspective, you're looking at people, what's happening with people and how is that reflected? And I think that's where that connection is for me.
Yeah, I love the fact that you studied history of art specifically as well, because we I've built my new company as poetry because poetry is an art form,
Uh-huh.
and it's all about words to achieve influence and make people feel a certain way. And I think recruitment is all about uh, it's an art form, and it's all about words as well, and it's all about you can say something in one way. Um, and you achieve a very negative response. You
Hmm.
can say almost the same thing, but with the words in a slightly different format, and you achieve a completely different result.
Right. That's right. Never dull.
No, so
No.
tell me about you've worked for some big companies. Tell me about recruiter enablement. What's that? What's that to you?
Yeah. So when I think about recruiter enablement, to me, it's actually about going above and beyond what's expected. So I think so many, most TA teams today have a set of metrics that you're looking at. And in order to be a recruiter that's sort of meeting expectations, you have to have a certain time to fill or, a certain number of jobs that you're filling, whatever the metrics are. And I think for when I think about teams that have been really equipped and enabled to be successful, they um, and deliver outstanding results to the business, they're going above and beyond that. It's really about how recruiters behave, how they think, how quickly they learn, and how much they adjust, because there's always going to be, I feel like, in recruiting, there's constant challenges. It's never the way it's supposed to be. It's never what you expect. And you have to be able to really constantly pivot. For me, I think alignment is the first thing that is just really critical. So, when I think about searches and what's gone wrong in my own experience and with team members, it always goes back to some kind of misalignment. So it's a job description that wasn't written the right way. It's an expectation that one interviewer had that's different than another. And so being able to really constantly think about, where are different members of the team, different stakeholders have all different perspectives, and being able to really manage and juggle that is a big part for me about, I think, being a really successful and enabled recruiter. I think capacity is another thing that, to be honest, I don't think we talk enough about. I heard one of your other guests talk about capacity in the system, but I also think about recruiter capacity.
Yep.
And along with that, I think goes customization. So I think a lot of times TA teams are trying to make one model work, and someone that's recruiting for interns is extremely different than someone that's recruiting for an executive position or a high volume evergreen role versus a technical role. And I think those two things have to really be looked at very closely. And I wish I could say that more teams and leaders were focused on that. I feel like there's definitely some things that we're still behind on, but I guess I'm hopeful that those things will come. And I think, I guess, a bonus thought for me is also what we talked about with the art piece, which is like going deeper. I feel like, when I listen to podcasts and things like that, which I love, I feel like there's times where it's this sugar-coated story that everything sounds great, and it's like to be able to really take a step back and look at what's happening beneath, whether it's a candidate's expectations and like really truly understanding, from their perspective, getting in their shoes and understanding what are they really looking for, what's really driving them, is going to make someone a very successful and enabled recruiter versus someone that kind of takes things at surface and is just moving along to the next thing. So I think that kind of curiosity is a really big part of it.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, Rebecca Oldham from MasterCard talked quite a lot about the concept of curiosity and like probing and the types of questions that you need to understand. Attempt like a library of the types of questions at the beginning before you've got sufficient experience. A library of the types of questions that are really useful to open up from the hiring manager. What really are they looking for, and what really does success look like? Is something which I think is vital.
Yeah.
You're the first person. This is like interview maybe number 100 or something like that, and you're the first person who's come from the background of specifically of executive recruiting. Now, I believe that every search has got completely unique characteristics to it, but there is a lot of knowledge that an exec recruiter needs, which is valid across all searches. What's the character of the CEO? What is the company's vision and mission and purpose? You probably need to understand the company's financial position and the company's competitive position in the market. And there's quite a lot of things that, especially knowledge, that you're going to need for every search. So when you've been working in large companies in like in-house search teams, how has that knowledge transfer sort of been delivered?
Yeah. So I guess I've seen it done well and not as well.
Yep.
I think it goes back to each recruiter you have to kind of take it and own it yourself. So, a lot of times you inherit searches, from another recruiter or from an executive. Sometimes your chief people officer or TA director might be, kicking things off initially, and then you're the one that's actually running things and has to execute. So, I think it goes back to just starting with the stakeholder. Like you have to, invest the time and build the relationship with them, even if it means they have to repeat themselves, which I know, like, and acknowledging that with them, but saying, look, I know. And I think like for me, what helps me is when I write things down and take notes, that's what solidifies things in my brain. So I think
Yes.
each recruiter has to figure out what's the right thing for them. Some people might be able to hear it and be able to really understand something, but kind of figuring out what works for you. Um, and, I think you can never get back that time, whether it's the first week or two when you're new on a search, or if you're in a new role and you have, let's say, 30 to 60 days to really get acclimated to things. I think you have to really take that time to listen as well. That's something else we were talking about, like kind of getting to the deeper level. I think you have to give the space to really listen to what they're saying. You're not going off of, in the background, you have a list of questions you're trying to get through if you're kicking off a search, but you have to step away from that and really listen to what they're saying. For me, one thing that worked really well was a listening tour where I went around and I met different people that were involved in the interview process, gathering information, collecting it, analyzing it, and then acting on it, and then also sharing it. So if you do all that, but you don't share that information, and you can, sharing something like that with a colleague could help them with their search. So I know I'm trailing off a little bit from your question, but I think with knowledge, you have to really go out on your own and get as much as possible. And that might mean, and each search is, if you're looking for a chief legal officer versus a finance director, all of that detail is going to be totally different. So you have to really, I think, get in the weeds and talk to as many people on the team, if the, people on the interviewing team, even people that may not be on the interviewing team, but that are part of it, asking questions, doing your own research. There's so much information out there and accessible today that you can look on LinkedIn. You can join groups, right? You can join organizations where that type of candidate is, and just listening to really learn the right language. I think speaking the language of the CEO, whoever it is really important. And I think doing a robust kickoff is a big part of that information gathering where you start to really gain knowledge. But I think a lot of people stop there and they don't continue and keep learning and go back with more questions. Like, it can be intimidating to ask a C-suite executive to repeat something or say, hey, I have more questions. But that's where I feel like sometimes you can literally sense the engagement from them. And they're like, wow, this person's actually listening and paying attention to what I'm looking for. And that then starts a really positive chain of events.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Joy, thank you very much for taking the time to join me today. I've enjoyed hearing about your comments on recruiter enablement, and specifically, I've enjoyed learning a little bit more about the in-house exec search role and some of the things involved in that as well. So it's been a great pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Same. Thanks, Adam.